All right, well, let's get started. I'm Matt Howerton, reporter anchor fill-in here at WFAA. To my right,
I'm Paul Wedding, digital content producer.
awesome, and across from us is the Chris Jericho here today with us, talking about AEW, talking about just everything that's going on in his life presently and also in the past. So let's just get something out of the way. You guys are here in town for AEW this week. What should fans expect? And
every year we come for Winter is Coming. It's one of kind of our tentpole events here in AEW. We do it in Dallas every year, which is great. And Ring of Honor Final Battle was in Dallas last year, so it's a little bit of a tradition. Mm-hmm. So something we've done pretty good over the last 4 years since we started is kind of do these shows on a regular basis. You know, Grand Slam in New York in September, Wembley in August in London, and then of course, like I said, Dallas here usually every December. So that's what we're here for.
Yeah, you guys have a huge footprint here in North Texas. There's a big wrestling footprint here in North Texas. I mean, what are your memories of Dallas? You've wrestled here before plenty of times. What's that like coming back to?
Yeah, I mean, Dallas is it's a great wrestling city for sure. Always has been for me, and I think there's certain areas of the country where you can kind of have that history. You know, Dallas obviously has it, and Calgary has it, and Portland has it, and Florida has it. So there's always generations of fans that appreciate the sport, especially here in Texas, and especially here in Dallas, which is one of the reasons why we're here for the whole week.
Yeah. Are you going to be wrestling anybody this week, or do you know yet?
Well, the good thing about AEW is our roster is so expansive that the only show that I'm doing is Dynamite, which is on Wednesday. And storyline-wise, it's not a wrestling week for me, but it's an interview week, a promo segment. So, you know, that's the most important thing about wrestling and about what we do, especially in AEW, is tell the stories. You know, the matches are important, but what leads to those matches and kind of the trials and tribulations behind them is what matters more than anything. And that's what really hooks the fans is the good stories and the characters and the personalities that are behind them.
Let's talk about your creativity in storytelling, because it's always been changing, and you've always been finding ways to reinvent yourself from here to there. I remember I read your book, A Lion's Tale, and you were talking about being in WCW and just getting a camera, and I think you were on Capitol Hill, and they were just like, hey, go out and film this stuff, and there was nobody checking you at all. It was kind of gave you a chance to be creative in the moment and at that time. What's it like in AEW now that you're kind of the main guy who started everything and brought everything, I think, upon like the spotlight? And what about storytelling there and for you right now?
Well, like I said, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying earlier is the story of what you're doing is the most important thing. So I think over the last 4 years, I've had a lot of influence and a lot of input into what I'm doing. And that's been a really kind of a cool creative element. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy AEW is kind of that side of it. And when you've been doing this as long as I have, you can really kind of sense what people want and what they're looking for and how to twist and turn that, you know? So it is kind of really creatively stimulating and a challenge to kind of come up with stuff, not just for each week, but months ahead.
Yeah.
And also, too, you got to go with the flow. You got to let the story lead you. You can't try and lead the story because then it becomes more about what you want. And you can't predict something that's going to happen 3 weeks from now or a month from now or what kind of reaction the crowds are going to give you. And maybe they're cheering something you thought they were going to boo or booing something you thought they were going to cheer. And you have to take that in consideration when you're kind of writing these ideas down. And that's important. You have to kind of read the room, as we say. Right. And I think I can do that pretty good at this point.
Yeah. You know, I see a lot of people online in recent months, fans of AEW, who say that maybe AEW is kind of going through a bit of an identity crisis, or that they're leaning a little too much into the sports entertainment and less into the wrestling like they used to. It seems like maybe that's not the case as much the last few weeks, but I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, people's opinions are opinions, especially on social media, when everybody's going to say what they think, you know, with no consequences, and mostly a lot of negativity. I think our shows have been great. I think the matches have been great, and we've done a great job of kind of balancing the storylines along with these amazing matches. But the most important thing that we've been doing is building stars. And like I said, I mean, I'm sure people that are on the Dallas Cowboys or people that are making movies or, you know, if you're in a band, it's like being a Kiss fan. Kiss fans hate everything, but they still buy everything.
Sure.
And I find a lot of wrestling fans are like that too. They just hate everything. I mean, if you listen to public opinion online, I should be shot and killed and never show my face on wrestling again because I'm the worst possible thing that could ever happen to the business is me still being in existence. And like, either you believe that or you don't, and I don't. So sure. I don't think the majority of people do either, but there's still people that are going to say that. So it's your opinion. You know, I never worry about people that don't like what we do because you can't convince them. They just don't like it, and that's fine. It's your opinion. I worry about the people that do like our show and worry about making new fans of our show.
Sure.
And that's the most important thing.
What was if there was there a locker room reaction to when CM Punk debuted in WWE, or was it just, did it like light a fire under anybody, or was it just like business as usual?
Business as usual, man. It happens. Same reason I'm sure there wasn't a big reaction when Adam Copeland came to WWE, or came to AEW, or when Will Ospreay signed with AEW, or when Danielson and Moxley and Adam Cole came to AEW. It's good for the business that guys have the ability to go between companies. It's great for the fans, and it's great for the talent overall. So the business, it just makes the business stronger, and that's the most important thing.
Sure.
You know, you're, like I said, you're walking up here, you're like, I've been doing this for 33 years. You said on the Van Vliet show, you've wrestled the best in Mexico, Japan, you know, here in the United States. What keeps your drive going, man? Just essentially, because I know you love the sport, you love to...
Yeah, I love what I do, you know, and I think that's one of the greatest things about when AEW started is it kind of reinvigorated that passion for the business. If there was no AEW, I don't know if I'd still be wrestling right now, but it's really kind of been a lot of fun working with Tony Khan, and like we mentioned, kind of really having a lot of say in the stories and the matches that I'm doing. And that's exciting. Exciting watching the company grow. Yeah. You know, to see how big we've gotten in just 4 years. I mean, that's a very short period of time. And to be able to be number one on Wednesday nights for the most part, in the ratings, in the demo, you know, putting 81,000 people in Wembley Stadium or 22,000 people in Arthur Ashe Stadium, you know, all these kind of tentpole milestones, even coming to Dallas as much as we have. You know, the reason why we're here 3 nights this week is because we have a great fan base that loves our product. And just to see that growth in such a short time and thinking about where we're going to be 2 years from now or 4 years from now, that's exciting to me too. And I'm very proud that I'm one of the kind of the pioneers of AEW, and it's a great place to be when you see how much has happened as a result of that.
Go ahead, Paul.
You know, I was curious, AEW's recently started kind of developing a working relationship with CMLL. Mystico came and worked here, obviously, and then Andrade is going to be working down there. I was curious if you thought there was any potential for a return of Corazon de Leon to Arena Mexico someday.
I mean, there's always potential. It depends on what the match is, though, and that's the cool thing. Like for me at this point in time, I don't have to ever go back to Mexico. I've spent so many years there, and I love my time there. But if a match came up that was interesting, I'd do it. I just went to Japan a few weeks ago to work with Takeshita.
That was a great match.
And thank you, in DDT. I'd never been to DDT before. I'd worked New Japan specifically for the last few years, but it was the match that, it's like, how can you go there? It's like, because I really wanted to work with Takeshita in Japan. So if there's somebody in Mexico that seems to me would be really interesting to work with there, then I'd do it. You know, it's the same reason why I don't want to work with Minoru Suzuki here in AEW. I want to wait to do it in Japan. I think there's a big match that we could have there. And, I've worked with Commander and I've worked with Bandito here in AEW in the States and Commander's in Canada. Both those matches were tremendous. So maybe a match against Bandito in Mexico in his home country, that'd be something that I'd be interested in. You know, there's a lot of guys in our company, Vikingo, guys like that, Roosh. I never wrestled a match with Roosh ever, so if we've waited this long to do it in AEW, maybe do it in Mexico might be a bigger money prospect. So that's kind of what I think about. So there's always a chance for sure.
Okay. Is that essentially, like I said, when you're looking at the lines of things that you haven't done in your career just yet, are those kind of the, like the things that you still want to do is like wrestle guys like that you haven't done, any sort of matches with?
I really don't have a list of things I still want to do. Like I said, to me, it's all stories. Yeah. Like if there's a story that came up tomorrow that involved me having a blood feud with Danhausen, I would do it, or whoever it may be. So it's the same reason last year, I think it was in San Antonio, wherever the hell it was, I did the match with Action Andretti where...
That was here.
Here.
Yeah.
Here, right? Yeah. So, what a match that was. Nobody
Yeah.
expected it. And the story that we told was like, Jericho's got a tune-up match after he lost the championship to Claudio and just picking some random job guy. And then the job guy wins. Like, what a great moment that was.
Yeah.
That, to me, was the perfect guy for the job, was Action Andretti. Right. Will I ever wrestle him again? I don't know. But, for that night, that was the perfect story to be told. So that's kind of what stimulates me at this point in time as far as what do I want to do and who do I have left to work. And I don't think of things that way. It's like, who's the next cool storyline that I can be involved with, and then we'll take it from there.
Gotcha. Tell me a little bit about your trip to Vietnam recently. How did you find out, I guess, about the wrestling scene? What was that like?
So Talk is Jericho is my podcast, and somebody reached out to my producer, like, we have a wrestling company in Vietnam. Would Chris like to, talk to us? And I thought, what an interesting concept, like Vietnam. Like, never thought of wrestling being there. And I think when, myself included, most people hear the name Vietnam, you instantly think, Full Metal Jacket and
Right.
Apocalypse Now and, the war. And I thought, what an interesting connection between the Western world and the Eastern world, pro wrestling. That's kind of the bridge that everybody can understand. And after the podcast was over, kind of listening to what they went through to get it started and the passion they had, they didn't even have a wrestling ring at first. They wrestled on mats. I thought there's a real interesting documentary in there. And I've done a couple documentaries so far, and I thought, let me send a film crew there and let's get a movie out of it. And so the guys were there probably about 10 days before I was, but I knew that I wanted to be there. And we didn't even know what capacity, but when I was there, we came up with the ending of the documentary. It's going to be really cool, very heartwarming, and it's going to once again show that, like, pro wrestling is this entity that is worldwide. It's not just here in the States. It's not just in Canada. It's everywhere. And it makes people happy and gives them a chance to live their dreams no matter what country you happen to be born in. And I just thought that's a story that I wanted to tell.
Yeah, I was watching this wrestling company in Nepal on YouTube a few days ago.
Wow.
And they had,
who would ever think, right?
Yeah, and like they had like Big Vito was going there to work with their top guy, and he started cheating to win, Big Vito, and the crowd went insane. They literally had military intervention to stop the crowd. They're so hot. It's just insane.
And that's what it was. And just to go there and see the reactions that people had, and it was a really cool experience. And I'm very excited and very happy that we had the idea, and I think the movie's going to be great.
Do you know when that's coming out?
We just got back last week, so I would say maybe 6 months.
Okay.
It's all in the edit, right? So.
Yeah.
But I know that we have what we need to make a great, emotional, impactful movie.
Great.
What about, I've always wanted to ask you this question, and Paul and I talk about it all the time. It's just how wrestlers work to maintain the mystery of wrestling at this day and age because of social media that kind of gets involved in the way. Back in the 90s, it was so much fun for me to watch on a Thursday or a Monday night and just to see you wrestle, to see other big names wrestle and not know what was coming next. Children could probably still do that these days because maybe they don't have access to social media. But how do you guys approach that now, just when it comes down to, like you said, storytelling?
Approach the magic of wrestling, you mean, or approach?
Kind of like just that whole what's coming next. I'm not expecting what's coming next.
Yeah, well, I think once again, going back to what you mentioned earlier, Paul, about social media, and I think people get angry when they don't know the end of the story.
Yeah.
At the beginning. Sometimes people get mad because I like long-term storyline.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're like, oh, the story's too long. Like, the story's never too long.
Right.
It's a week-by-week chapter. I've read The Stand by Stephen King. That's 1,200 pages. Is it too long? Well, no. Mm-hmm. It takes a while to get through it. But when you're done, you're like, that was one of the greatest stories that I've ever read. So I think that a lot of people want to know what's happening instantly. It's like, if I watch a movie, I don't want to know the end of the movie before I've even seen it. That's called a spoiler. So I don't believe in spoilers, and the story will be told as long as it needs to be told, or as short as it needs to be told. Mm-hmm. I did a great story with Sting earlier this year that I think was 4 weeks, but that was the perfect time. And I did a story with MJF that was literally 366 days, a year and a day, and it was the right time. So that's the most important thing is once again, you let the story lead you. You don't try and lead the story.
Right.
And that's the most important thing, you know, and that's part of the magic of wrestling is no one knows where it's going. And nor do you want to, you know, and if you do want to, then especially where I'm concerned, you're going to just have to wait. And if that makes you mad, well, then that's going to at least keep you tuning in every week.
Right.
Or then don't watch. You're banned. And then go watch something else.
I do want to talk about how are you looking at your life now? Because I mean, you were talking about it, you know, just recently about how you have one of the few people that can say that you've wrestled, you know, big names in WCW, big names in WWE, big names in AEW. It's awesome to I think most people would look at you and say, wow, you know, I remember, you know, Chris Jericho, not just from now, but obviously from his great days in the 90s when we were all watching TV on an appointment television type basis. Like, how are you looking back at your career right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just wrestling big names and those. I can go back and think of wrestling, you know, Dick Slater, for example, and guys like this. Like, what? You know, when did you wrestle Dick Slater, or working with you know, Negro Casas or guys like that in Mexico, Bestia Salvaje, like these are, you know, El Dandy or Atsushi Onita or Hayabusa when he was E.G. Izaki. Like going back, even in Canada, Johnny Smith and Great Gamma and Jerry Morrow, from those old school names that you probably never even heard of, but historians know, all the way up until, you know, working with, you know, Dante Martin, who's 19, I think, when I first wrestled him, like future champions, Daniel Garcia. Like, I just think that there's been such longevity that people forget that.
Yeah.
You know, I was just literally found out today that somebody sent me a card yesterday from 2002, and the main event in the Worcester Centrum was Hulk Hogan versus Chris Jericho for the WWF Championship, which is pretty cool. What I just found out today that was the last ever WWF match. The next day it changed to WWE.
Really?
So I wrestled the last WWF match ever in a championship match versus Hulk Hogan. Like, that's mind-blowing. But once again, that's just another thing. You want to talk about the longevity of Chris Jericho and all these cool milestones. I mean, nobody can say that. And you know, people bag on me for like being egotistical. I'm not being. I'm just telling you facts. Like, these are real things that happened. You know, and I think that's pretty cool to be able to say, like, you name an era of pro wrestling. Because I started in '90s, so you talk about a Dick Slater, for example. That's an '80s guy. Like, the '80s up until the 2023s, I've pretty much wrestled everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think a lot of people can say that. And it's just in the history of the business that long, in that many different countries and areas. And, you know, I wrestled a guy called René Lezotès, which you guys don't know, but Claudio Castagnoli knows exactly who René Lezotès is, and so does William Regal. Anybody that's from Europe knows this guy. He's 70, 80 now, but I wrestled him when I was 22 years old, like even from Europe. So I just think that's something that, like, there's probably a book in there somewhere of just saying, like, here's the different things that Chris Jericho did that no one can ever claim to do, and it's kind of a cool story.
It's kind of like reading the amount of Hall of Famers that Nolan Ryan struck out. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's
right.
true. It's very true.
You could do that with me, because even if it was like, I mean, David Boy Smith, I wrestled him once, but still, you put that name on the list. Like, there's anybody you can pretty much think of. I mean, there's some. I never wrestled Bret Hart or Owen, unfortunately. You know, I never wrestled the Great Muta. But you're talking about guys like that I never wrestled, but pretty much everyone else in between. It's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask is, how do you just come up with your improvisation so well? I think you're really, people talk about The Rock, about how he had a gab, you know, and could talk to the audience and everything, but I think I laughed so hard during any segment where you were given the chance to go out there and just talk and just do your bit and just do your thing wherever you were. And I specifically laughed at the times that the camaraderie you and Stephanie McMahon had it, or Stephanie McMahon Helmsley now, but just some of the jokes that you guys threw back and forth at each other. I think that's when I was like, Chris Jericho's hilarious, and this is one of these moments where I think you grew on a lot of people back then. How do you maintain that improvisation, and where do you grab it from?
Either you have it or you don't. You know, that's one of the reasons why I always had such great chemistry with The Rock, was he was so good as a babyface that he needed somebody that was really good on the mic as a heel to go toe-to-toe with him to make it entertaining, and that's what I was able to do. We used to go out after the matches, you know, we'd finish the match and stay out in the ring for another 20 minutes just doing improv comedy.
Really?
I remember Pat Patterson used to hate it because you do this great match and then after nobody remembers because you're doing the comedy. And it's like, people love that part of it. Like, okay, we did the match, it was amazing. Now let's have the dessert and have fun of just burying each other on the mic just with nothing. Steve Austin was great at it too. So I always had great times with both those guys because I could go toe to toe with them and then always play the fool at the end. But that was my job, right? So yeah, you either have that or you don't. And that's one of the things when I left wrestling in the mid-2000s and went and studied with the Groundlings, which is one of the greatest improv comedy troupes of all time. I mean, Phil Hartman, Kristen Wiig, Paul Rubens, Will Ferrell were Groundlings. And learning not just the concept of improv, which I already knew, but how to really focus in on that, really commit to it. It helped a lot, and it's something that to this day I love doing improv. It's because it's listening. You're just listening to each other. It's one of the reasons why I think Talk is Jericho's had such longevity is when you're the host of a podcast, you don't pull out a list of questions. You just have a conversation. And that's the best thing. And you listen to what your guest is saying. And sometimes the best stories come from things that you had no idea prior, and that's what you want. You want to peel away the layers of the onion. When you do an interview and someone pulls out a list of questions, it's not going to be quite the same because all they're thinking about is, here's my next question. I got to get to the next question. Like, what if I'm talking on this question that's taking us to all these magical lands? The next question. Who cares? Get rid of it, man. Like, you don't need it because you've got all you wanted over here. And sometimes people want to go back over here, and it's like, I don't want to go over here. I'd rather stay over in this world. And you have to kind of read your guest and know that too.
Well, I was going to say you did really well, I thought. One of my favorite performances that you've done is on the silver screen in MacGruber. It was very short, where you played, I think Tug Speedman was the name of the character. Do you remember?
Frank Corver.
That's what it was. That's what it is. And yeah, there's a moment where you're in the gym and then the van. Sorry, I'm giving out spoilers.
Well, the movie's
it's like 10 years old.
I think it's okay. Yeah.
But it's just, did you ever want to do more acting or anything else?
Well, the funny thing about that is that was quite a lot of improv. Will Forte was also a Groundling. And typical Jericho, when they asked me to do the part, I was like, well, I'll only do it if there's lines. And so they had some lines, and I was like, it's not enough lines. I'm just going to improv with him. And either he'll go with it or he won't. And either the director will like it or he won't. They could just say, hey, Chris, stick to the script, or that's great, let's do it again. And so that's what we did. I improv. I mean, it was a short scene, but it would have been a lot shorter had I not thrown a couple lines at him. And I can't remember, you and your
dick comments.
Yeah, that's
you say it's fun to say them, and then I think I say fun to listen. That's why I say them.
That's why I listen. That was all improv. That was all made up on the spot.
I love it.
So yeah, I mean, so you kind of go into it with that attitude and that idea. And I've done actually quite a few movies over the last year or two. It's kind of that world is opening up now a little bit more as well. So. It's all timing, I mean, I couldn't really do a lot of acting in the 2000s, 2010s because I was working 4 days a week with WWE, and then Fozzy comes into play, and that kind of takes up a lot of time too. But now with AEW, we work basically once a week. I mean, sometimes it's two, but most of the time it's one. So it gives you a lot more time to do Fozzy tours, and that's where the band has grown as much as we have, or to do more acting, which is why I've done 5 movies in the last year, maybe 6, something like that. So yeah, it's all timing and just keeping the plate spinning in a way that you can make everything work.
By the way, I know that back and forth because me and my friends, we say it.
There you go.
All the time.
Yeah, I went to Saturday Night Live.
Thank you for the banter.
Yeah, I went to a taping, a Saturday Night Live taping with Will right after the movie came out, and it was Halloween, and we were at the after party. And this guy came up to me, and it was John Mayer, and he was talking all this weird conversation. What is he talking about? And he was wearing a stormtrooper outfit with his stormtrooper helmet in his hand. And I realized he was saying that scene from MacGruber verbatim.
Oh, really?
You and your dick comments. That's what I said. So I was like, dude. He's like, dude, MacGruber's the greatest movie of all time. It's my favorite. I know it all off by heart. It's just out of nowhere, John Mayer in a stormtrooper outfit coming to quote my lines to me was at a Saturday Night Live party. It was one of those random stories.
Yeah.
I think that's something that obviously resonates. That just you have a great charisma, panache, whether it's wrestling or it's ever on acting. Any follow-up?
Yeah, just real quick, going back to comments about improv, I feel like that's, comparing AEW to WWE real quick, I feel like a lot of wrestlers prefer that about AEW where you don't have 20 writers who are telling you what to say.
That's one of the things that appealed to me right at the start. I remember the first promo I had was Fight for the Fallen in Jacksonville pre-pandemic, so 2019, and I had a promo again about Adam Page, and I was like, all right, like people say you're good at promos, like do you still remember how to just do it off the top and not have a writer? And I did it, and it worked out great, and you're like, okay, I don't need writers anymore, and not that I ever relied on them, but you'd always would work with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to get your promo approved by Vince, and that's just the way it was. AEW, there's no approval, which sometimes guys get in trouble for, as we've seen, and trouble happens. But when you're a true pro, you know how to go to the ring and explain what you're trying to explain in your own words. Mm-hmm. And I don't need a script. Now, I write ideas down, and sometimes I write, if it's a longer promo, I'll write the whole thing down just to know what my bullet points are, but I'm still writing it myself. Mm-hmm. And it should be that way. It's live TV. You want to make sure you get it absolutely correct. But I've never had a promo approved ever in AEW. Maybe a line or two. Like, can I say this? Is this against the rules of the network or whatever it may be? But that once again is really kind of fun because you're creatively coming up with all this amazing stuff. And like tomorrow night, we're going to hear from the Golden Jets. What's it going to be? Well, I know exactly what it's going to be in my head because I've wrote the whole thing. Now, there's not all the lines, but this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And that's cool because that's all part of the stories that we're telling too.
I love that you've always stuck up for yourself. Like whether it was in WCW, I remember reading in your book, A Lion's Tale, you kind of knew there was a different type of politic, in that locker room. WWE too, and I think you going to AEW was a way of saying, I'm going to go do this and stick up for myself. That's so relatable, I think, just for any normal person, whether it's at your job or in any sort of facet of life.
Right.
Where does that come from you? Or, is that just like is that how you were raised? Like, I'm always going to be sticking up for myself?
How I was always raised and never, getting bullied a little bit as a kid to your friend, like, I'm just done with this. I don't care how big the guy is. I'm just going to take a swing at him. Who gives a shit what happens? And that sort of an attitude. My dad was in the NHL for 10 years as a fighter and a goal scorer too, but he never had a problem fighting guys. And I think that kind of rubbed off on me. Not that fight is not always violence. Fight is also sometimes from a mental standpoint. And then getting into the business the way I did, like when I first started, I was a small guy. So, how do you compete? Well, you have to have the biggest charisma, the biggest personality, and you have to have a lot of balls, And going to Japan and Mexico where guys would try and take advantage of you, you would just fight them. Like that was the match. You just punch a guy in the face, and there you go. Here's the fight wrestling match. So it's the predetermined wrestling match turns into a fist fight. Either you win the fight or you don't, but either way, you're not going to let somebody take advantage of you. And I think wrestling-wise, especially WCW, there was so many politics that kind of gave you a little bit of a sense of, okay, you got to really fight back here. And then going to WWE, when I first went there, was a total political quagmire. It was awful. And it's like, listen, I've got nothing to lose. I'm already getting politically buried. I'm going to just start standing up for myself. And then also too, like, that would be confused as arrogance. If you're standing up for, like, I think this story is better than this story. Well, he's just too arrogant. He won't listen. Like, no, I know I'm right. Like, I know I'm right. And then when I was allowed to do it, guess what? I was right. And then suddenly you start getting respect from that. And then suddenly you're expected to stand up for yourself and give ideas. And then that just kind of continues on and carries on to where you are now. Now you do that respectfully.
Sure.
You don't tell someone that they're stupid for having an idea. But I just know mine's better. And sometimes when it's not, that's good too. Or sometimes when it's like, if I know my idea is better, but my boss wants me to do it that way, okay, well, my idea now has to go away because it's not what he wants. Then I have to do this to the best of my abilities. And that's something that's very important in the wrestling business too. You have to do what your boss wants you to do. It's like he's the director. And if I'm cast in a movie and, the director is, I don't know, Steven Spielberg, and he wants me to, get my arm shot off in the first scene, and I refuse because it's not right for my character, well, then guess what? You're fired, and they'll bring in some other guy to get his arm shot off. Like, you do what you're told to do, but you make it as great as you possibly can.
Yeah. You're talking about, standing up for yourself for fights, and I thought, even just like 9 or 10 years ago, I was amazed when I heard you got in Brock Lesnar's face, the UFC champion, after that Randy Orton match. You remember that? Yeah. That was just I don't know.
Well, I mean, it was one of those things. Like, at the time, it was just the way that it had to be, and I was like, "F it, I don't care. I'll bite his nose off. He'll kill me, but he's going home with no nose." Obviously, it didn't happen, but I never. Whether that's stupid or not, you have to stand up for what's right, and you can't back down to anybody. And sometimes there's 300-pound ex-UFC champions that you're not backing down from. So
I would root for you. I'm on your side.
underdog, David and Goliath.
Everything all right? You got any more? Any follow-up?
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for this. We will be posting the whole thing on WFAA.com.
Amazing.
Yeah.